Welcome, everyone, to episode 56 of Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. I am here with Toby, primarily known as a PUBG commentator. I know you recently did Worlds, which seemed like a lot of fun. And you're
Mm-hmm.
casting the finals, I believe, as well. So congrats on
Correct.
that. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting to know more about you and also the world of PUBG. I've had a few previous guests that are into it, but I think you're one of the primary PUBG commentators. So, welcome. It's a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to meet you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, pleasure. Likewise, I've heard about you from colleagues that work within the StarCraft scene too, and only heard positives. But I should add, so pleasure being here.
Good, yes, because I was going to say I know who you work with, so if they didn't, I'd go after them. All right, so yeah, so you're primarily known for PUBG, but
Yes.
what is your story of how to get, when did you get into video games? When did you get into esports?
I think video games is always. I mean, being a kid born in 1990, grew up with Sega's and Nintendo 64s. I mean, video games have always been there, and I jumped on that wagon very early on. Quickly learned that it was more fun than playing sports. While I tried to do both, video games would usually take my time. So there was that Counter Strike, then into Warcraft, into World of Warcraft, and then kind of onward from there. It's just always been fun, playing video games with friends and whatnot. But it wasn't really until I moved out and were on my own that I suppose when you don't have parents saying 1 hour gaming, 1 hour playing outside, you get to spend more time playing video games. And then I started playing a lot of Counter Strike, played a lot of League of Legends at the time, and that's when I feel like my eyes were open to like more of a competitive scene within esports.
When you're talking about moving out and getting into the competitive scene, what years are we
Hmm.
talking?
I moved out in that must have been 13,
Okay.
2013, 12, 12, 13 around then. Yeah, and I was starting to watch while I was playing League, not at a high level or anything. I was starting to watch some of the League of Legends tournaments in like season 2, season 3 back in the beginning. I started watching and following some Counter-Strike stuff as well. Obviously Denmark having a pretty big scene given the not that big scene at the time. A lot of the people back then were Danish, so had the pleasure of following quite a few of those. Got a Twitter account, a Twitch account, I should add, and then the whole world kind of opened up for me once I realized that was a thing.
Yeah, yeah. And when did you start getting into esports? I guess more of a job.
It's a weird story. Me and a friend of mine have always had a thing where if someone dares the other guy to do something, they kind of just have to do it with limits, obviously. So I had a friend who played in a very low level amateur Danish Counter Strike tournament, and we were all sitting in my apartment, kind of having a small LAN party, and we were watching the tournament being broadcasted while our friend was sitting in the other room playing the tournament. And obviously, I mean, there were probably like 3 viewers on Twitch or something, small Danish thing. And there was this commentator who he was very new to the job, and he was stuttering all the time. And I remember saying, "This is so annoying that he's stuttering so much. I'm sure I could do better than him." And then my friend goes, "Oh, you can? Then go prove it." And I was like, "Damn it! Now I have to try and do esports commentary." So I DM'd the moderator in the Twitch chat, and I was like, "Yeah, so hi, my name is Toby. I've done some musical stuff before. I've been on a stage. I feel like I know how to talk into a microphone, and I play a lot of video games. Can I try being a commentator?" And I think he was a little confused at the time. So he sent me to talk to his boss, I suppose, and they were like, "Yeah, you can get the kind of bottom of the bottom tiers to cast in Danish." I was like, "Oh, thanks. That's fine." And then I did that for a couple of weeks. I slowly kind of evolved, and then we were doing. I realized that the company that was hosting these tournaments were also the ones that were running Copenhagen Games, and I'm from Copenhagen, so they asked me if I wanted to do Copenhagen Games, like the B stream. At the time, I was like, "Well, yes, obviously," and that was me being 3 or 4 weeks into casting as a whole. So we got to cast some really, really big games because I remember it as being that there were issues with the stage or the mainstream. So some of the games that were supposed to have been like the main broadcast games, we got to broadcast instead. So I did those, and it was just so much fun seeing a ton of people watch it in chat, and we were we changed to casting in English because now we're going, oh, wait, we're getting hosted by so many people. We gotta like swap the language because all of a sudden there's 5,000-6,000 people in the chat that usually has what, like 20. We gotta try and do it in English, and that's where my eyes kind of opened up to that. And then I did that for a while, and then that's really the intro to it via like Counter-Strike.
That's such a cool intro, though. I kind of had the same
Mm-hmm.
story, except not nearly as big and propelling forward. Where a friend and I were listening to commentary for a very small tournament that we had participated in. And we were like, "This
Mm-hmm.
guy's not that great. Let's do our own." We didn't ask permission though. We just opened up our stream. But
Oh,
fortunately,
okay.
the guy in charge liked us. And the caster that was there, and this is again like 5 viewer cast, but
Mm.
he really did not like us. He was angry at us. And this was 2010 or something. Just the ability to stream was a
Mm-hmm.
huge
Oh yeah,
yeah, bonus on your resume.
for
So
sure.
anyway, so actually just to clear it up, so native Danish speaker, right?
Danish.
English
Yes, yes,
speaking.
correct.
How comfortable were you with casting just on the Switch like that?
Again, I mean, as I said, I had done a lot of music performance in general, so the whole talking, not singing, obviously. Rare casting occasions allows me to do that, but talking into a microphone was very comfortable. And I had at the time, a year prior, spent an entire year in America as a
Okay.
exchange student, so my English was, well, apart from a couple of words, probably as good at the time as it is now. But I think it's a couple of weeks back, actually, I went back and watched my first ever English broadcast. It exists online, but I'm not going to tell anyone where they can find it.
Right? Yeah,
I went
exactly.
back and I watched it, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? But at least that's a sign that I've evolved, so I guess it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. So pretty awesome that worked out so well, so
Hmm.
coincidentally. So
It was very coincidentally.
CS:GO is really your intro into real work, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah, it was. I did that with them for a while. Then we had a little bit of a falling out, some disagreements and whatnot.
Mm.
And at the time, that was just when PUBG released in like early 17. And a friend of mine asked if we should play some PUBG. I was like, "Well, sure. I mean, I'm doing Counter Strike, but I'll try PUBG." And I don't think it took more than a week or week and a half until I was completely in love with the game, despite how many errors and bugs there were in the game at the time. It was just so much fun because it was something I had never ever played before. Like, it felt like an open world explorer type thing when you didn't know the maps, but it was still a survive and get the win sort of thing. So it was just mind blowing. So to me, so I asked the company that we were doing Counter Strike with if we could try and do some PUBG tournaments, because now the game was on the up and coming, and there were a lot of streamers that were playing it. So we did some small Danish things, and then after the whole falling out, I left them, and then I was like, well, now I'm back to square one, but I really love PUBG. So I reached out to another tournament organizer, asked them, hey, I see you have a lot of tournaments, just amateur stuff, but it's not being broadcasted. How about I broadcast some of it for you? And that's when I made my Twitch account to broadcast those like early on PUBG tournaments. I mean, I didn't make it. I had an account that I never used for anything, but that's when I started streaming. And then there were the IEM qualifiers in 2000, like late 17. And I think I had, I don't know, 30, 40 followers at the time. And then, you know how when you have group stages of various tournaments, people will come into your channel. Oh, are you covering group 37B? Or, like there's a
Yeah.
billion different names. And I didn't know any of the teams. All I knew was I want to try casting PUBG. So people came into my chat and went, "Oh, are you casting this group?" And I went, "Yeah, I am." "Oh, put it in your, Twitch
Mm.
title." I was like, "Oh, how do I do that?" Okay, figured that out, put it in there. And then, without me knowing, apparently the game that I was about to commentate, or the 4 games in a row, were with two of the biggest CIS teams at the time. So one guy comes into my chat and goes, "Hey, watch this." And I'm like, "What? Watch what? I don't know what's going on." And I get like 3 hosts in a row, all of above 3,000 viewers on my 20 follower channel. So all of a sudden I'm sitting with, I have screenshots of it still too. All of a sudden I'm like the number one PUBG channel on Twitch while it was a big game. And the first thing I do is just follower mode only.
Yeah.
And over that weekend, I grew from those like around like sub 100 to 2,500 followers, all of which were CIS people that were never going to come back on my channel, obviously. But that was just to me the, oh my god, I actually might be able to pull this off. And then, I mean, obviously, since I casted so much, people were like, who the hell is this Toby guy? And why is he commentating stuff with so many viewers? And that's really what kind of got me my foot in to then approach other people in PUBG sports.
What year around was this?
That's got to be like October, November 17.
Okay. Because I would say that I even remember someone who didn't really get into PUBG, but I remember how exhilarating it was to play. I felt like everyone was playing it, and
Oh, yeah.
whether you were bad or good, it was just really fun to play.
Just have
So
fun.
even me, as a not particularly FPS person, I would play with some friends and we do stupid
Yeah,
shit,
exactly.
right? Like, I don't remember what we did because it was 5 years ago, but land on the really popular like building top and then I'll die immediately. It was,
just
good
do
times.
crazy stuff. Yeah, exactly. It was
Yeah.
it was, I mean, while there was, I suppose, H1C1 and the Armor 3 thing, which PUBG came from at the time, it was really like one of the very first battle royale games. So the whole concept of land somewhere, loot, have the circles shrink in, like we see with Fortnite, Apex, and all those games now, they didn't exist at the time.
Right.
So, and I think that was also, as I said before, part of what got me so excited about the game, because it was something I had never experienced before.
Yeah, and you just ran with that excitement, started doing whatever you could,
and it's still there.
Yeah, exactly. But it is interesting because I believe PUBG doesn't have replays, right? Just to get that out of the way.
It what?
Doesn't have replays. You can't download a replay and then cast
You
it.
can't. I mean, yeah, you can.
Oh,
you can. I mean,
Oh,
of your own
wow.
games, you can't
Oh,
go. You
okay.
can't. It doesn't have an in-game like competitive like you would do with Counter-Strike, where you get a GoTV file that you can then go into. But
Right.
in your own games, you can go in and watch replays.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna, yeah. So the basis of what I was going to talk about is have to do with the replay system. In StarCraft 2, it is the easiest and most natural thing in the world to expect replays. I mean, even back in Brood War, you would have people who would like basically sneak out in the middle of the night, internet-wise, to take like B teamers replays from a Kespa team, and they could get like huge trouble for it, by the way. But they would take it and then get doled out to the foreigners. And it was back in 1998. This was happening, and then we're in this current esports market, and as someone who's tried to explore other options, for me, the easiest thing is you get a bunch of replays that are usually for free. You can usually get some really high level pros, and then you just do it yourself. And that is the easiest thing. Do it yourself, right? Is always the mantra for a lot of people when they're asked, like, how do you get into this? But PUBG doesn't have that system, even though there is a way to do some practice casting, which is cool, but doesn't have that system. So how difficult did you find it to then get these jobs, get consistent gigs to put on your Twitch stream?
What I did was, and I think that's an advice to any caster out there wanting to do something, what I did was I worked like 2 jobs for 3 months. And over that time, there were a lot of PUBG tournaments coming up. And over that time, I saved up enough money that I knew for the next 2 months, technically, I don't need to like make any money. I can pay my rent and I can still eat. I probably won't be able to go on vacations all the time, but I can pay my rent and I'll be alive. So what I did was great. Now I have 2 months, and that was really the amount of time I told myself, now I'm going all in to see, can I really do this? And then, because there were at the time 3 or 4 different tournament organizers doing their own tournaments before there was like a whole global point system and all that. And I just reached out to all of them. Hey, I can see all of your tournaments are only being broadcasted from, around like not semifinals, but like the very close qualifier stage and then grand finals. You're not having any of this other stuff broadcasted at all. I can do it because my advantage at the time was that I could do both observing in game, which takes a bit to learn because there's 64 players on the server at a time. At that time, 80, but that's another story. And my PC could run the stream, and I could do casting, so I could literally do 3 people's jobs, and they would only need to hire one guy because I was doing it for free too. So I was like, "Do you want your qualifiers broadcasted?" It's a win-win for you. It's just more hours on your end. And that way, I just for 3 months, I think I casted somewhere around 27 hours a week with like no pay at all for 2 months. And that again grew my channel because I one of the permissions I got was to broadcast a lot of it on my own
Mhm.
Twitch channel. That got me, affiliated, which was a little harder at the time than it is now. And kind of pushed me towards becoming a partner. But it also became a, who the hell is this Toby guy? Like, he's casting all the qualifiers of all the different tournaments. And that's when some of the main PUBG casters, because there weren't a lot of jobs available and a lot of casters wanted to do PUBG at the time, so some of them started DMing me, dude, I don't know who you are, but could I tag along for your like B stream broadcast tonight? Because I'm not casting anything, and you're literally casting like every day of the week. And then I got to know some of the casters, and that way I kind of got in a good foot with quite a few of them, and um started doing some stuff. And then one time, I mean, as it also always happens, one person was sick for one of the main broadcasts, and they were like, dude, you've been covering our like B tier broadcasts for the last 2 months, do you want to have a go at A tier? We'll fly you to Stockholm. I was like, wait, are you paying my plane ticket? It was like super surreal to me. And yeah, we'll pay you as well. Like, what the hell is this world? I don't even know how it works. And then I flew to Stockholm, and I like to say that the rest is kind of history from there on out.
Sounds like a real, I want to say a bit lucky, but actually,
Incredibly lucky.
true, yes. But then actually, this all came from your own, sticking the foot in the door. Like
Yeah,
you reached
yeah.
out, you did the work, you set up the risk fail as well, right? Not having
Mm.
a job for 2 months, so that's actually a lot. There's other stories on this podcast where it's like I was doing absolutely nothing, and then someone just came to me, right? So
That is luckier, I
yes,
suppose. Yeah, you're
yes,
right.
yeah.
You're right.
But still, a very direct shot up
Mm.
onto what I don't know. Like, you really need to find like a way to categorize these things, because there's different like premier tournaments and major
Yeah,
tournaments, and then they'll
true.
usually be the ones to label it themselves. But then for me as a caster, I always want to have some way to differentiate between the the not very prestigious gigs, I suppose, to the
Mm.
very prestigious gigs, kind of the general word that I use. But um, the first time you got paid, sounds like it was a big tournament. Yes.
I mean, it was the same. Again, there were only so many tournaments at the time,
Hmm.
but it was one of two European tournaments that um, didn't directly influence the global tournaments, but they were literally the only tournaments in all of Europe. So I guess you'd call it like
Yeah.
A tier. It's not the S tier where it's the company themselves that go out and finance the entire thing. It's like $1 million prize pools. I think this at the time was $15,000 prize pools, but then it's like early 18. So I suppose, yeah, like B A tier, but the only tier in Europe at the time.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So, well, then PUBG, I mean, eventually got bigger or got more supported
Mm-hmm.
by the developer. So, how was your journey along with that? Did you kind of bump up with the increased pay in tournaments, or
Yeah, I mean, every every journey has its ups and downs, and I think, like everyone else, had to learn how to do the whole social media thing, realizing that it's not always that everyone on Twitter want your opinion on everything. It took me a few attempts to learn that lesson. So there were probably ways that I could have climbed the ladder faster had I not, like put a stick in my own wheel every now and
Mm,
again. But that's, I mean, in the past now. And I like to think, yeah, with the growth of the scene at the time, and also me spending so much time both casting but also doing analysis videos on YouTube of the broadcasts and stuff, to really go in depth with things and just getting to know, the pro scene. There were a lot of casters at the time who just came in for the gigs and then kind of
mhm,
left to do other things. I also, because I was really passionate about the game, like to think that part of what got me to where I am now is because the pro scene really enjoyed, like, knew that I actually really care for this game, and I want to be good at what I do. I'm
mhm.
not just gonna talk about stuff and then go on to the next big thing. I was in it for the long haul. So yeah, when the game grew, I slowly, like go from the B tier to A tier, and then when you get a shot at the bigger tier, you do those two. And I think with that, I've always been a big believer of, in order to raise my rates when it comes to casting, I have to have something on my resume that gives me, or gives them, a reason to pay me more than they did before. So, for example, if I do a massive event, having, or my first global event, I was like, guys, now I've done a global event. Then you can up it a little bit. Then I get grand finals at a global event. Like all these
Hmm.
small check marks that allows you um, to increase your rate a little bit.
To
Never
negotiate.
anything massive, but that's, yeah. I like to have the checkbox and not just go, oh, but now it's been a year, so therefore I need more money. It's if you
That's
haven't done
interesting.
anything within that year.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of negotiating, I think it's a very tricky thing to do. There's no real set way of just like here's how you
Mm,
negotiate and make sure that you actually get paid. There's always that chance that even with the most savvy negotiators, that a company will just be like, nope, and then
true,
get someone else.
true.
But it sounds like your way has worked out so far, so that's actually
So
quite
far, so
cool.
good.
Yeah. Are there any other like notches that you would suggest, to other people who might be interested in
mm,
such a way?
I think, again, as with a lot of other jobs where you only see the tip of the iceberg, there is a portion of that iceberg which is underwater, and it's a very big portion. It's time consuming, it's stressing, it can be, I suppose, sometimes kind of depressing if you're really hyping yourself up to get some job and you don't get it, or whatever it may be. Just know that if you're out there wanting, like, and I think that's whether you want to be a caster, if you want to be a player, if you want to be a coach, whatever it may be, while esports from the outside perspective might look like a joyride on roses, it's those roses also have thorns, and it's, I mean, you would know it, I'm sure. It's a pretty tough job,
Hmm.
while we do our best to present it as being a joyride all the way through.
Yeah. Well, our job is literally to entertain and very.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. There's a place for shared commisery, I suppose, and especially
Yeah,
self deprecating humor. But generally,
exactly.
our job is to be like, it's great, guys. It's great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah, it's so that's probably one of the big things, and also just, commitment. I mean, one of the first things whenever I have friends go, "Oh, Toby, you're doing this esports thing," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." Oh, so if I want to become a Twitch star, what should I do? I'm like, well, for starters, there's no, I mean, recipe or guaranteed recipe for that. But one of the big things that I see is consistency. Like, you have to allow yourself to cancel dinner appointments, to cancel movie deals with friends, to not go on a vacation, because if you're not streaming those 3-4 days a week, uh, it's just not going to happen.
Hmm.
And people are like, wait, you have to work that much? It's like, yeah, it's a job. It's not just fun and video games. It's a job. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when they first get into it, they get overwhelmed. So if you come into it knowing what you have to do in order to get there, I think that's already you're one step ahead that way.
Yeah. And kind of in a similar line of thinking, all the work that goes in kind of behind the scenes, but you don't see when you're presented on camera. How was your development when compared to the other commentators that were also coming up?
I think when I started, and I suppose that's both good and not bad, but good and could be bad. That most of the talent that were in PUBG when I first got into it, at least in the European scene, were all talent that either came from other games or were kind of, branching out to get a feel of what is PUBG. I'm still going to do my main game, but what is PUBG?
Mm.
So therefore, I was the very, very new up and comer in a company of people who were all, at the time, as much as you could be, veterans. Um, I was working with Pansy, with D-Man, with some of these people that had been in the scene right from the get go. And I think one of my biggest hurdles at the time was having casted, again, those 25 plus hours a week of solo casting, where you have to fill, because you're literally like, whenever you're not talking, it's dead space. So one of my big issues was, uh, I don't even want to say trusting, because I just never got to that point. It was realizing that you don't have to be the one to talk all the time. It's a conversation between you and the co-caster. But because I had come from just solo casting, it seemed so unnatural to me to see something happen and not be the one to talk. So I would talk over people to the point where, I mean, obviously they would get annoyed by it and then say, I'm not like, I don't feel like casting with this Toby guy because I never actually, like, I never get a word. So I think, I mean, obviously now I'm friends with all these people, these people that I just mentioned. But I think when I see new casters now coming into PUBG, I cast with them and they do the exact same thing. As annoyed as I get in the situation, because it is what it is, I'm also like, in the back of my head, I was the exact same person. So I always, after a broadcast, go out and say, especially if they come in and say, hey, Toby, I want some feedback on things, I always go, this is something you can work on. And trust me, I've been in the exact same situation. And I feel like that's better than someone just going, oh, you talk too much, and just kind of leaving it there, but putting it into perspective, having been there myself.
Yeah, I think that happens when we have casters who come up really from a lot of solo casting, which is really
Mm.
most people because it is the easiest thing to do. Finding a co-caster on a regular basis is quite difficult.
I still haven't found mine, and I've been in the game for what now, 5 years? So yeah.
So in PUBG, there's not really set duos. You guys exchange.
No, there was a period where that was the case when I was still kind of up and coming in the game. There were definitely duos to a bigger extent than there is now. But no, for the most part. I mean, again, there's also been a lot of changing in and out of which talents stay within the scene,
Mm.
which go to other games. You know, there's been, I mean, just since PUBG came out, a lot. I can't even count the amount of esports that have actually risen and stayed relevant to this day. That a lot of the PUBG casters at the time jumped to. So I've had caster duos where my duo and I have had amazing synergy, and then he or she goes to another game for a week, and they're like, "Yeah, so I'm probably not gonna come back to PUBG anytime soon because I'm really loving this new game, whichever it may have been." So I guess I've been unlucky in that regard, but at the same time, I've also had the pleasure of working with a ton of different people.
It's it. It's kind of rare. Usually, I mean, even if they are people who are able to hop around different games, more power to them. I would say that usually people don't I don't know, acknowledge giving up on a potential revenue source.
True, true.
So that's
But I suppose
very
I mean
lucky.
it wasn't an instant jump like, hey, I've worked one day of a broadcast and now I'm never doing PUBG again. It was obviously over time, um, but yeah, it was just always, for some reason, always the people that I work with that ended up finding other places that may not have been better, but just what they like more. And I mean, I'm not in it for the money. I'm the type of person where I wouldn't want to go to cast. Like, I've been presented with opportunities to cast games where sure they could have paid better than what I was making at the time, but if it's a game I'm, you know, not playing nor enjoy watching or really have any interest in, I'm not going to go, yeah, I'm going to make a lot of money working a job that I just don't find to be enjoyable.
Right.
I don't like that at all.
So when it comes to working with different commentators,
Hmm.
have you found that you still overall appreciate, the amount of variety that you get? Do you think it's made you a better commentator, or do you really wish that you
Mm,
had a pretty much permanent partner?
I mean, I think both have their upsides and downsides. Obviously, if you have a permanent duo, your synergy, I mean, you have something to work on, so you can go great now for the next broad. Like, if I know I'm with you for the next 4 broadcasts, we can over time work and give feedback to one another. But if I'm casting with someone and I don't know if I'm ever going to see the person again, you might not have the same insensitive to want to spend that time working on synergy things
Mm,
with the person if you don't know if you're ever, I mean, like, as I said, gonna work with them again. So I think the variety of talent presents you with trying to cast in many different ways. Like, I feel I don't, also because PUBG is the way PUBG is, it's not like games like Counter-Strike and Valorant where you have a set color caster. Now there's like the buy time, the 15 seconds between the rounds. Now it's your turn to analyze the previous round. Oh wait, now the round started. Play by play. Go ahead, do your thing. Like, it's not as clear cut in PUBG because, as with other battle royales, fights can take place all over, so you have to be quick and jumping between the two. So I feel like I've learned to become both a color caster and a play by play caster because of that. Also, because then someone comes in that I haven't worked with before, and the first thing I'll say is, "Hey, buddy, so how do you prefer to do things?" It's not, "I want to do this, you better adapt." It's what, like, do you see yourself more as a hypey play by play guy, or do you want to do the analysis, or should just kind of do both of us. Um, so I think had I been with one person from the get go all the way till now, I would have found my role within that cast, and I probably wouldn't have become as adaptable
Hmm.
as I am now. Whereas to now, when I see feedback on broadcast and people go, "Oh yeah, Toby, broadcast with Toby and X person was so good, I really enjoyed it," and then, "Oh yeah, this broadcast with Toby and other X person was really good." I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing what the thing all those comments have in common is that I was part of it, and I like to think that not to praise myself, but that I've become good at making space for um or to allow the other talent that I'm working with to do what they enjoy most, and therefore, or by doing so, getting the best out of the broadcast that we can, instead of forcing someone into a position they might not be comfortable with just because I want to be, you know, a specific role within the cast.
Yeah, I think that it's really helped me develop as a commentator. That StarCraft never really has any duos,
Mm.
aside from basically Tastosis. So, yeah, but there is a lot to be said about how perfect, in synergy, some of these like Overwatch duos, for instance, who have been paired up with each other for years at this point,
Mm.
can have. Now, when it comes to PUBG, it sounds like there's quite a lot of crossover, though, or a lot of turnover. Sorry, turnover, because I mean, StarCraft, at the very least, there's like a set of like 8 casters that you can expect to
Mm.
cast at any time, and there's not really anyone coming in or leaving.
Yeah.
But in PUBG, it sounds like it happens quite often.
I mean, yeah, I think with the game having had its ups and downs in terms of rule changes, that some people were like, if this is a rule, I literally just cannot commentate this. Like, by adding this rule to the game, you've taken out all my joy of casting it, and therefore I'm just gonna jump ship. Those things has happened,
Hmm.
and then again, as I said, I mean, we have people now that I don't want to say came from PUBG, but were big in PUBG that are now some of the biggest Valorant casters. We have people that came from other big games that they then went back to. So I think, yeah, there's been a lot of changing in and out in the PUBG talent scene, and looking back, I haven't thought about this before. Just now, looking back at it from the EU talent pool, we're probably only like 3 or 4 that were in it from the very beginning, and now there are some new up and comers that are starting to get
Uh,
a foot in the same way that I did to begin with, by just casting everything they can get their hands on.
And how does the community take that? I suppose. Are you
Well,
in
there's
touch with the
always, I
community?
mean, you know how Reddit is, pretty much no matter which forum you go to. You know how Twitter can be sometimes. There's always going to be the, oh, bring back this person or bring back that person, they were amazing, without them having any clue as to why they aren't the ones being selected, whether it be personal or business wise, whatever it may be. They don't know the back end of it. So there's always going to be that, the people being nostalgic over a cast they once heard and loved. But for the most part, I like to think that the PUBG scene is pretty welcoming to new talent. I mean, other than, as I said, the few that came from other games, a lot of the PUBG talent that there is now have become casters, um, and started their career in PUBG. And let alone the fact that that can happen, I think speaks volumes to um, how welcoming the PUBG viewer base is. Now, of course, I mean, if you get hired for a main broadcast or a global broadcast and you don't know what you're doing, there's also going to be the people going, well, maybe this person shouldn't be doing this job. But other than that, I think overall the people are pretty welcoming for that.
Okay, cool. That is good. I did a little bit of research on the Reddit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
beforehand, and yeah, I see.
What did you find? Now I'm curious.
I found maybe like 25% of the comments are like, "Oh, I'm sad that Pansy's not here."
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
Yep, that's a thing. Yeah.
And then, yeah, actually, a lot of other comments were really happy that you were hired. I just literally searched like talent announcements on the subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, big respect in the community. But from your perspective, because I know the community might have different feelings on this, but from your
Mm.
perspective, how important is it that you are good at the game? If you are good at the game, I have no idea what you are.
I mean, I've played my fair share of PUBG. I'm not a pro player by any means. I will never try and convince anyone that I am, but I would say that I'm good enough that yes, I'm good enough to play the game at a pretty high level without being a professional
Right.
player.
Okay.
And I think that was, again, part of the reason why I fell in love with the game, because I started enjoying the more in-depth parts of the game, not just going, oh, this is what I've seen on broadcast, but when you know how difficult it can be to drive a car, jump into the passenger seat, lean out the window, shoot someone, cut back in the driver's seat, and continue driving that car. When you learn how many buttons you have to press in about 1.5 seconds in order to do something like that, and you haven't just watched someone on stream do it, you get a bigger respect, I feel like, of what the pros are capable of. And when even more so when the pros then do something where you go in game and you go, wait, how? You just sit back and go into a custom server and you go, wait, what are they even, which buttons are they pressing in order to move around like this? That's when I get incredibly impressed, humbled, really, to get to sit and broadcast people that have spent so much time perfecting a skill, which when I'm looking at the keyboard, I can barely even map out how they're pulling off.
Yeah.
So it's, those sort of things, I think, and I sidetracked massively. I do that all the time. I'm sorry, but but that I think is important, at least to me, that I have a skill set not as high, but an understanding of what it takes, of what it is that they do that makes them the best at the game.
Yeah. I personally would say that I think playing the game is very important. I'm not so keen on the whole, you have to be super high level. And yeah, one of those reasons is that I think if you can understand why something is difficult and explain accurately how it's difficult, that adds a lot of emotion to your broadcast.
For sure.
So that, the difference of someone who's maybe not so interested in the game going oh yeah, that was really cool. And someone who's really interested in the game being look guys, this was actually amazing. Here, let me detail.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's really important. But the reason, I asked kind of after the last question was that, when you have so many transient casters, people who kind of come and go, it's very unlikely that they're particularly good at the game, right? They
Yeah.
might be decent casters, but
Yeah, they're not always the best players, but then I hope that they will have done, I hope they're aware that they're not the best players. They're not gonna start out every broadcast going, "Oh yeah, so when I was playing a game earlier today, I actually also got a kill." That's it's not about you, the show. So I hope that those talent, which are the up and comers, spend their time maybe just going, I'm not gonna be the best at the game, so let me spend that extra amount of time maybe talking to the players, maybe watching back VODs and really in depth trying to find out what is it that Team Liquid does that allows them to pull off this one maneuver every single time, and but in doing so, not have the understanding of the game from a competitive playing perspective, but having just watched so much that you to put it into different words, I think one thing that I like when I convinced myself I'm good enough now is when I started to be able to, how when we cast PUBG, we have a main feed, like the broadcast feed, and then we have a map feed next to it. So we can, an entire monitor that is just the map. And when I could look at the map and go, okay, this is what's happening right now. These two teams are there, the circle is there. Liquid is going to do this next circle, or FaZe Clan is going to go over here and do that. When I could say that a minute prior and then see it unfold the exact way that I had just predicted it or expected it to go down, that's when I realized, wait, okay, now I'm in a position where I'm in the head of the pro players. My skill set isn't there, but I can understand the game from a level of pro play, and I think that adds a lot to caster value, that you can say things and not go, yeah, really cool if they do this and then they do something completely opposite, but that it's kind of a stamp of approval, so to speak, that this guy has done his shit in order to get to the point where he is.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I actually predicted something correctly a minute ahead, and then on a solo broadcast where I can do whatever I want, I just sit there and I'm just yeah, I'm amazing. Don't worry about it.
You can do that on duo broadcast too. It might not come off as well, but yeah, it's been done.
So and you don't have to name any names, or if you haven't had this experience, feel free to tell me. But do you get to work with people where you're just kind of sitting there and you're like, I don't know if they really know what they're doing. I don't know if they're really talking about. And then how do you handle that on the broadcast?
On the broadcast, I think it takes two to tango, right? It's one of the more important things to me, and that's also when I go back to thinking of my early days where I constantly, talked over the other caster, or felt that it was more important for me to say something, even if they might have been in the middle of a sentence, because my opinion is the important one. If one caster does a bad job, the cast is bad. And therefore, even though you might be good, you will look bad too, because they're going to remember the broadcast as being the one where stuff was bad. So if someone comes along and says something that is just straight up incorrect, or a clear sign that this person has not done anything to prepare for this broadcast, I would never go, "Oh, you're incorrect," or "Oh, how are you so dumb?" Or like, there are many ways to correct people on air, and I think one is to, instead of saying they're wrong, then trying to argue why you think it's something else.
Okay.
And then maybe after the show or after the broadcast, you can have the, um, what was that thing like? How did it come to you that that was the right thing to say? Then you can have the, what led you to that point. But I don't think, I would never want to try and sit and make someone look like on air that they weren't prepared.
Hmm.
The only few times stuff like that has happened is when it's been something that's just been so far fetched, and I just don't say anything. I just kind of go, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? If it's something like straight up stupid, and for the most part it's people that would like know the right one, but saying things wrong, or just misunderstanding a situation, going, "Oh, right, yeah, I get you." So it's rare that it's people coming in that literally knows like nothing,
Yeah.
fortunately.
Well, I think also I would hope, but I think of some experiences I've had where at the
Hmm.
very least, as you had said earlier, they come in like kind of at that point where they're just like, yeah, I don't know. So I think
Hmm.
I've had or seen situations in other esports too where one person will say something, the other person, yeah, will be quiet or just kind of go like, yeah, okay.
On to the next thing.
Yeah, and then the original person will at least have enough of the self-awareness to be like, "Okay, is that totally wrong?
Yeah.
Like, that's on me. Sorry about
Yeah.
that." Uh,
I
and
mean,
that can make it okay.
yeah, I mean, I've had that too, where you say something, and then when you finish your sentence, first you go to yourself, wait, what the hell did I just say? And then you realize, wait, that was completely incorrect. And then you're already on to the next thing, and there's no time to correct yourself. And then when you're sitting in the studio, you look over your shoulder to the guy next to you, and he's just looking at you like, what the like, what was that all about? I've had those moments, and then sure, someone might go on Reddit and go, "Toby said this thing, haha, he was so dumb." But then I'm like, you know what? I mean, I would rather have one thing that I said be incorrect and the next 99 be the right ones, because then they will know. That's kind of odd that he said something so stupid. Must have been a mistake. I don't
Right.
feel a need to jump onto Reddit and go, "Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I said a word that wasn't correct." It's people will know by watching enough that um, that was just a mistake.
I think that that actually is a big reason why being a kind of permanent fixture in a community is also a very big deal. There's
Mm.
many reasons, but one of the more overlooked ones, perhaps, is that yeah, people kind of give you the benefit of the doubt. Similar to when like pros cast, and even pros will say things that are incorrect, don't play out the
Hmm.
way that they think. Of course, they get a lot of the benefit of the doubt because they're pros.
Yeah.
Um, so let me ask you about the general casting of PUBG because PUBG did come in as you said there were some predecessors, but PUBG I believe really was the big
The battle royale.
battle royale. Thank you. Yeah, exactly, the
Yeah.
battle royale for a while.
Mm.
How did the casting form? Because when we see some of these new genres pop up, there's some of that
Mm.
awkward teenage phase of the casting. StarCraft, we actually had a basis built up a long time ago by Taste of the Narcosis, basically, and that
Mm.
was chill, friendly banter more so than a lot of other things. Rocket League. Right was like this huge new idea of a video game that was going to be
Yeah.
broadcast, and they took some inspiration from apparently hockey. Talked to one of the guys. They said
Okay.
hockey was actually really helpful. Uh, PUBG. Did you put a lot of thought process into this, or did you kind of just go like, "This works, and I'm going to run with it"? And then how did it work with the other guys who were also coming up?
I think when it first came out, as you're kind of alluding to, there weren't really a whole lot of other games. I mean, H1C1 and Armor 3 were being streamed, but there weren't really big tournaments in the
Mhm.
games. So for people coming into it, I think initially a lot of people from a casting perspective treated it as a FPS shooter, like a Counter Strike where we go, "Oh, headshot, oh, nice sprayer, oh my god, he got 2 kills," without really putting too much thought into what is that rotation, or what, like, all the billion other aspects that goes into the battle royale genre in general, the looting, the where do you land, how do you gather info for the circles to come, all these sort of things people just didn't know enough about to focus on. And so I don't blame anyone in the beginning for not, talking about that, because it's just, it wasn't even thought about. Like, if you go back to 2017, 2018 PUBG and listen to the casts, no one would ever talk about like how they would rotate into the circle, scouting forward for the next circle to the same extent that they do today, because it just wasn't common knowledge. Teams were learning it, players were learning it, but they weren't going to share it with the casters, because then they were going to say, oh yeah, Liquid does this thing, and then like a second later everyone else knows that that's what they do, right? So we kind of had to figure most of the things out for ourselves, and I think that's clear to see over the years of PUBG commentary, that it took a while for it to be not just a he shot someone, let's hype that up, or this car made 5 flips, let's laugh at that sort of moments. It took a little while from being at that stage till all, like, talent really started to understand the um, more in-depth layers of PUBG, which the players were also only then finding out, because a lot of the players that came to PUBG didn't necessarily come from, Armor 3 or H1C1, the predecessors of somewhat similar game modes. They were coming from, most of them hadn't been pros in other things. We had people that were coming from League of Legends. I think a couple of people came from StarCraft too, not necessarily from a pro perspective, but having grinded the hell out of that game. So everyone was kind of finding their footing in a game mode that wasn't really cemented as being a FPS shooter or a TPP shooter at the time, really. So it was kind of interesting seeing how all these people from, like, completely different game styles came in. Some were really good at the rotational part, the whole strategizing, where do we go, which compound is going to be free. Some were just, mechanically skilled fraggers, and that's what they were focusing on. And I think that's what helped grow the interest. I mean, with you saying you played it too, it was the thing that no matter what you're good at, there's always kind of a job for you in a PUBG team. Are you the strategy? Like, are you the strategic person? Are you the tank that just goes out and blocks all the bullets, sort of thing? Or are you the fragger? Are you the lone sniper sitting in a bush somewhere? Or how do you like to go about playing it? I think that's what got a lot of people into PUBG to begin with, was that it was so open. Like, there wasn't one way to win the game. Yeah, you had to be the last alive, but there were many ways to get to that point.
Yeah, for me, I was a lot of just like following directions person.
Yeah, I mean, that works too.
Yeah,
If you then do what you have to when you're told to do what you got to do, then
yeah.
usually that means win.
Although I did win one by myself. Well, not by myself, but I got chicken dinner with randos who didn't tell me anything. So,
Well, there you go.
crowning achievement.
There you
Yeah.
go. That's a good thing.
So a lot of the time, casting is just really focusing on storytelling, whether we realize it or not.
Mm,
For PUBG and the way that it plays out, especially with, I think, a bit more of a complicated scoring system than any
yeah.
other game. There's very simple, like Rocket League is the simplest, but then there's medium simple, like CSGO, and then there's probably even a bit difficult. StarCraft 2 has even experimented or wanted to experiment with,
Mm.
simplifying the end goal. I think PUBG is incredibly complicated, and I know you guys even changed your scoring system. I talked
It
with
was changed. I mean, we have had,
yeah.
fortunately, the same scoring system for a while now, which
Okay.
is, it might not be the best in terms of, competitive play and how things kind of pan out, but it is the best for simplicity. It
Okay.
is 1 point per kill. That's pretty simple, easy to understand. Then it's 10 points for a win. And then you have, like, decreasing points going down to 8th place. And then if you finish, because there's 16 teams. So if you finish 9th through 16th, you get no points.
Okay.
And that's really, I mean, then you rack up points over, like, whether it be 10, 8, 12, 20, whatever amount of games in a like in a stage of the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's relatively simple to understand, as simple
Yeah,
as maybe like a
fortunately.
bracket or something like that. But I do think that as far as getting all this information and communicating the importance to the public is where it can be
Mm,
much more complicated, because the first thing you see is a bunch of players, and then you recognize that there are teams, then you recognize there's a circle, and then
yeah.
so as a commentator, where do you kind of find yourself focusing in on? How do you approach making
Mm.
sure that it's a very, I guess, a story to be told? Because even if you think that your primary audience are experienced PUBG players, you kind of have a natural understanding, you still usually have a way of,
Mm.
communicating even to them, like, this is what's important, this is what the next step, that the most important next step is, and you're driving that story. So, yeah, your thoughts on how you do that as a PUBG commentator.
I think the majority of the competitive PUBG audience now are all pretty. I mean, obviously the game's been out for quite a few years at this point, so all the viewers have a pretty good understanding of the game itself.
Hmm.
So to then add the point system on top of that is pretty simple. But having said that, I still like to think that I try to cater to the new viewers to the extent where there's probably going to be a 50% of the viewers in chat who will go, Toby, why are you saying this? It's obvious. But having a esports scene that hasn't exactly been growing over the last couple of years, I'm like, if there's, I mean, out of the X thousand people watching, if there's a percentage of that being people going, I'm not sure about this game, let me be convinced. I would much rather cater to them and then also add the kind of the sprinkle of high level in depth analysis, then I would just full on cater to the competitive players, like high level players that aren't playing the tournament themselves. And then you can have new viewers going, "What the hell is he talking about? And what are all these call outs? And what is all this?" So I like to try and focus the story on things that people, regardless of whether you have 10,000 hours in PUBG or you've just installed it, that people can understand. Because I think it's important that you tell a story that that everyone can get along with. You might not get that much out of it if you're like super high in-depth person, but that's sometimes what I feel like the analyst desk caters better to. Like they will have the time
Mm.
to break certain things down, where when you're casting, because PUBG has, it's like, I mean, essentially like 16 teams playing chess at the same time on the same board, right? You can't go full in depth with every one team and every one fight, because as soon as you finish off one fight, you might have 5 seconds, and then the camera boom jumps over to the next fight, or there might just be 4 teams fighting in the same fight,
Hmm.
and you won't have the time to
Yeah.
go like full on analytical. That's why I started doing those analysis videos I did at the time. They never really got a whole lot of viewership, but I think I have somewhere along the lines of like, I don't know, 1,000 hours worth of material on YouTube. And I still sometimes get comments on like videos from 2018. Toby, where are these? Like, why did you stop? Where are these videos? So that's fun to see people enjoying sitting back and watching that, because that's where I would pause. One game of 25 minutes could be a 3 hour analysis
Hmm.
of just flying around the map and going, this is what they did, that is what they did, this is what these guys did. Um, so I like to think that I can on air cater to, well, everyone, and then in my own time I can try and be more analytical.
I think the analyst videos are one of those things that people ask for, so you do it, or because you're
Mm,
naturally interested in it. But I feel like a lot of people
mm.
ask for it, and then very few people show up for it.
Oh yeah.
But the people who do are usually pretty dedicated, so there's always that to consider.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely,
like
definitely.
how much they're going to appreciate you, and how much more likely they're going to give you a sub or something like that,
For sure.
compared to something that gets 2,000 viewers. But yeah, so I just say, because when it comes down to it, the ultimate goal for a lot of casual players of PUBG is usually just chicken dinner, right? Being the last person alive. But
Yeah,
obviously for tournaments, that's not the case.
it was for a little while.
Okay.
Everyone hated it, and then it wasn't anymore, so
Okay.
thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think it's fascinating to kind of have to constrain your commentary with that in mind, because there could be something really cool happening between two teams, but then what if they're like really not important on the scoreboard? I don't really know how it works.
No, no,
Yeah.
that's. I like to think that now the observers that we have that are still dedicated to competitive PUBG have become, I mean, absolutely phenomenal in keeping track of everything, to the extent where even though they sometimes don't hear what we're saying because they might not understand English or whatnot, they will be like jumping straight over to the fight that I was about to talk about anyway, because we're just on the same level of understanding of the game. So I think that's phenomenal. That's to me like the start, because I don't like to spend too much time talking about things that aren't taking place in a spot where viewers have access to it. I don't want to break down a fight happening like off screen, because that's just gonna confuse
Yeah,
people.
could be very confusing.
Um, so when it comes to PUBG and the kind of the storylining of it, I think it's how to put it. It's again, I mean, with I completely lost track. Say your question again. Sorry.
Um, the points versus like a really
Exactly,
important
exactly,
battle. Yeah.
exactly. So even though there might be a fight taking place out, like way outside the circle between two teams that aren't going to be important at all, if we're fortunate that there isn't anything relevant going on, we can cover that, because I mean, it's either that or just watching people sitting in a house doing nothing. So we'll focus on that. But the observers have gotten so good at being at the most important place at the right time. And the most important place might not be two teams full on brawling into one another. It could be a car driving through a forest, because we know that if he goes through that forest, he's going to get over to that house, and him being in that house means that he could win the game, and this team is currently fighting for second place. And those are the sort of things that I try to help viewers understand, that it's not just that first person shooter game. There's so much more to PUBG than just being a good fragger. We have seen teams where you have 4 excellent fraggers on a team, but because no one has that, excess understanding of the rotation perspective, the coordination and planning perspective, they don't win, even though they
Hmm.
might be the best Twitch streamer superstars that get 30, 40 kills every time they drop against a, random lobby. Those players don't always, or oftentimes don't win, because you need that much more broader knowledge. And I think that perspective, when people then understand, always comes to me, oh my god, PUBG is so much more in depth than I thought it was. I thought it was just about slaughtering everyone and surviving. And I'm like, yeah, technically it is, but it's very hard to get there. So I think that's a story I like to focus on, how players do things that are so fantastic that viewers might not always understand what is.
I think that's a real drive for a lot of people getting into commentary of their esport, is to really
Mm.
drive home, communicate what is so impressive about what's happening, because it's an especially difficult task when it comes to a virtual thing. Again,
Mm.
understand, just watching someone do a backflip is always the example I give, is understandably difficult, but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we focus on, or kind of got the general overview of PUBG commentating. Just quick
Hmm.
questions on some of the general casting. So you had a lot of people come and go, a lot of the experienced people as well, which is awesome. Do you remember
Yeah.
anything in particular that you really learned from some of these very established commentators, either almost subconsciously, or did they actually tell you anything?
I mean, I had a period where I was in. There was a league format at the time where they were doing a ton of games, and I was not casting the main broadcast. I was casting like the contender broadcast, and I was in Ukraine for around a half year in Kiev working with Salader alongside James Banks, and that's again where we're going to be in the same room for the next half year. We might as well get a good cast together. And him and I talked. He was way more experienced, obviously, in casting in general than I was, and he kind of took me under his wing, and helped me work on a lot of the struggles I felt like I had. Things that I knew I wasn't doing right, but I didn't know what to do in order to correct. Like I knew I have this thing that I do wrong, but I came to him like, what do I do to work on that? And he would help me out with that. And having had that help from someone else who was bigger than you, at least to me, it showed me the importance of, and I always like to use this phrase, that thinking colleague over competition in a casting world, where I mean, you probably. I mean, I don't know how the StarCraft scene is because I've never really followed that game, but there's always going to be the backstabbers. There's always going to be the undercutters. You're always going to be. Should I really share with this person my personal whatever it may be fact? Because what if he or she sometime uses it against me? There's always going to be that. So I've just kind of turned it on dime and said, you know what, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not even going to doubt people. I will be the happy Labrador that comes through the door and just smiles and waves at everyone until they give me a reason not to be that guy anymore. Uh, and people have given me reasons not to be that guy on different occasions, but for the most part, I think if you're just nice, humble, honest, to people with people, they'll be the same way to you, and that has taught me a lot in terms of casting. Like, it has made it easier for me to talk to other people. It has made it easier for me to seek advice because people have understood that I'm not a guy that will go out and, like, if you tell me something in confidence, I'm not going to go out and send that to the first journalist I can find. I'm not going to go out and say to the TO, "Oh, this guy said that." I'm, just. I think confidence in your colleagues, as I like to call it, is incredibly important, and you don't build that if the entire scene is just people worried that someone else is out for their job.
Yeah. I love the phrase colleague over competition. Absolutely. Don't have too much of it in StarCraft anymore. I think we did,
Glad to hear.
you know, it's 12 years ago at this point, but absolutely. A lot of the, I think, newer games get that because there's also always going to be that more rabid rush to be the person
Mm,
in that new video game
for
that
sure, for
has,
sure, for sure.
promise. So that's a very good way of looking at things. And then I guess my last question is, do
Hmm.
you have any advice for the up and coming PUBG commentators, people who are like, I love this game and I'm going to stick with it and only it?
I'm especially with PUBG. I would say if you aren't presented with opportunities, because there aren't that many tournaments and whatnot going on right now, if you aren't presented with opportunities, make those opportunities yourself. It sounds super cliche, I know, but I was at a point where I wasn't getting hired for things. Not because I wasn't good enough, but there just weren't a whole lot of tournaments. And the few tournaments that there were, the people who were, I mean, house held names at the time were getting those gigs. Because why would a TO risk uh, a good broadcast hiring me when they knew that the person they already had worked with before did a good job,
Mm.
you know? Um, so I just went to a TO that weren't covering PUBG at the time and was like, hey, you want to, can I make a tournament in PUBG and use your platform? And they were like, yeah. I mean, it was a win-win for them, right? Because it's not really going to cost them a whole lot on my end if we can find the sponsors for it. So I would say for any caster out there, if you're not being given chances to cast PUBG, make chances for yourself. Whether it be having to then settle with, okay, I'm not gonna get to cast Face Clan. I'm not gonna get to cast, the top echelons of competitive PUBG. I'll have to stick with the lower tier. Well, I mean, I grinded my way through open qualifier broadcasts for a year and a half before essentially getting my first payday. It's a tough job. You can't just come in from the street and go, hey, so I want to cast the global championship. It's like with every other job, you got to get your promotions every now and again.
And
You got to be in it if you're not in it. Let me put it this way: if you're not in for the long haul, don't even start because it's a tough journey, and
okay.
you got to be willing to take the punches in order to get your way there.
Yeah, good sum. I also think beautifully said, like, you got to make your own opportunities.
Yeah,
Which, if you're really, I think, organized, actually, because you even said it, like, there's been times where you probably could have done things faster if you just, didn't do certain,
yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah,
X, Y, or Z. But yeah, absolutely, I think there's examples of people who shoot up really fast out of sheer luck. Great for them. I think there's examples of people who shoot up really fast because they make those opportunities. They're constantly reaching
for
out.
sure.
They know kind of what the end goal is, and they have their little plan. Generally organized people, and
Mm,
hard workers as well.
yeah,
And then you have the people who do it for like 2-3 years and they get the job, and it's like, okay, that's also amount of respect that is deserved.
mm.
But yeah, I like whatever you do, opening up those doors, right? It's really important. So that is it for this interview. Thank you so much again, Toby, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And any shout outs you want to do, the next cast you're going to be on?
Nothing fancy, man. As I said, coming into this, I literally just landed from a cast, ran into my apartment, sat down by the computer, and jumped on here. That was amazing. No, I mean, I think I'm never one to announce that I'm casting stuff without it having had some sort of a talent announcement first.
Oh.
But as I say to the viewers that do come into my chat every now and again, it's been a while since I haven't covered a major PUBG broadcast, so you can probably expect that I'll be on the next few, unless if something completely crazy happens.
I love it. As in an esport that is also just straight up forgotten to do talent announcements, the weird, like, I
Just
suppose
we just
so.
do we reach a point at one point where we just do them ourselves. Now they've
Exactly.
started. Now they have started doing them instead because they realize we can't give them the creative freedom to go out and do the talent announcements. They get too
Oh.
crazy. So now they've gone back to doing the more formal ones because they didn't like the way that
Oh
we were doing
wow.
them.
That's funny. That's funny because I
So maybe you just gotta go full crazy mode, and then maybe they'll start doing them again.
maybe that's the trick. That's a unique problem, I think. So many other
Hmm.
places, or even I feel like other esports people are saying, like, why do they even exist? Why even do this? Just let people do it on their own. And here we have, I guess, an esport that got reprimanded for doing it on their own.
Hmm.
It's
People
funny.
got very creative, but yeah, no, it's the name is Toby on pretty much any platform, so it should be easy enough to find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you guys for watching and or listening. Thank you to Shayne for co-producing the podcast and Barrett for helping to reach out and organize. And thank you to the people who support the Patreon, patreon.com/ZombieGrub, especially those who go above and beyond. Nick, Vinny, Steven, ET, Ravi, and CuddleBunny. Thank you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you all back here for episode 57. Bye-bye.